name's India Thomas, and I'm the Training and Special Projects Coordinator for the California Democratic Party. And today we have the wonderful James Stewart. You may know him as Mr. Parliamentarian. And he's going to go through Robert's Rules of Order a bit and talk about virtual meetings. And it's going to be wonderful. So I'm going to kick it off to him. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And happy Friday the 13th, everybody. Woo. I am a professional registered parliamentarian. I have been a practicing consulting parliamentarian for 20 years. I have served 4 terms as president of the State Association of Parliamentarians, 2 terms on the national board, 1 term as parliamentarian for the National Association of Parliamentarians. And I serve organizations ranging from, local clubs to national and international organizations. I was just actually contacted by an international group of cinematographers, so we'll see. Okay, we're going to cover some of parliamentary procedure, but I'm going to kind of concentrate on some of the areas that people get wrong, some of the most common errors, as well as some of the basic information. Okay, next, please. Don't be like the guy on the left there. If you have a question, ask it. Type it in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat. And I'll either answer your question or I'll tell you to hang on because we're going to cover it. Next, please. Okay, to start off, a couple of things to put it in context. Ken Arrow is a Nobel laureate in economics and founder of the field of social choice theory, which is the science of looking at how people and why people make decisions the way they do, particularly in large groups. And the couple of observations here that are important, we know there is no rule that everybody is going to like. So this brings about paradoxes in the process of social decision making. Next. And one of his cohorts makes the observation that the way you make the decision and the decision you make may vary depending upon the environment in which the question was asked. So you may answer the question differently in your local Elks Club than you do here in the Democratic Party. So we need to keep those things in mind when we look at our decision making. Okay, next slide. Okay, what does this stuff called parliamentary procedure do? Well, most people think that this is designed to help you have a nice, efficient, effective meeting, and it does that. But that's actually a side effect. Next. The main purpose is to protect the rights of the members and of the minority. And in this case, minority has its simplest definition, any group less than half. In particular, any minority that is more than 1/3 of the total membership of that particular meeting. It's to guarantee that everybody has the same rights in the meeting. Next. It gives a decision-making process that can be trusted. When everybody knows what they're doing, then this cannot be manipulated. Imagine, if you will, 300 parliamentarians in a room at a convention, and this is the convention of the National Association of Parliamentarians. We're all trying to outdo each other and show off our parliamentary knowledge. But it never works because we all know exactly what's going on and we know how to counter the counter to the counter to the counter. So this process can't be manipulated to any significant extent if everybody knows what they're doing. And next, it also provides a process for effective, efficient, and ordered decision-making in what is inherently a chaotic situation. Next. Okay, what is a majority? Next. Most people think it's 50% plus 1. Next. That's wrong. It is not 50% plus 1. Think of it this way. If you have 10 people, 50% is 5. 5 plus 1 is 6. That works. 6 is a majority. If you have 11, 50% is 5.5. 5.5 plus 1 is 6.5. You still have a problem. Next. So the definition of majority actually is more than half. Next. Or, as I like to put it, the next whole number greater than 50%. Next. And this also applies to other percentages. So if you're using 60% or using 2/3, which is 67 and 2/3, it's not 66 and 2/3, it's not 66 and 2/3, it's 67. So it's the next whole number, okay? Next. Okay, point of order. This is something next that a member alerts the chair that an improper action has taken place. It is not a vehicle just to get the attention of the chair so you can do something. You cannot, for example, say, point of order, I move that. That doesn't work. This is simply to alert to a parliamentary fault. Next. This does not require a second. Next. No vote is taken. Next. It is not debatable. Next. The chair decides the point is well taken. Next, but that decision can be appealed, and we'll talk about appeal later in the presentation. Okay, next. Abstentions. Next. No one can be compelled to vote unless you are an elected seated legislator. Next. Abstentions are not votes. They do not count, ever. They're not a protest vote. They're not I just don't like this vote. It doesn't matter why you're abstaining. You abstain because you don't want to vote. Those who are not there abstain as much as those who are there and say they abstain. That's why, next, abstentions are normally not asked for. The only time an abstention is actually recorded is when you do a ballot vote. I'm not a ballot vote, sorry, a roll call vote. Because each person is answering, I know, or abstain when you do a roll call vote. Next. However, they may be recorded with the permission of the body or by a special rule of order, and this is generally to deal with people who might have a conflict of interest. So you obviously want to have their abstention recorded in the minutes as a protection, not only for the association, but for them as well. And I've had several instances where the fact that that abstention for conflict of interest was recorded in the minutes saved somebody's backside. Next. Okay, true or false? Next. Chair can only vote to break a tie. That is false. Next. The chair can vote on any question. They are a member of the body. They can vote on any question, but normally they only vote on a ballot vote because, of course, that's secret, or when it makes a difference. So they can either make a tie or break a tie, but just like they're not compelled to vote, they can't be forced to break a tie. Next. Respectful debate engenders respected decisions. I'm often called on because there's a group that has this small body of dissenters who are causing all sorts of havoc, and they want to know how to squelch them. And what I tell them is that's the worst possible thing you can do. Squelching them only gives them the sympathy vote. It gives them the position that, hey, we are being put upon, therefore we have special rights. If you give them their due, you let them have their time to speak, let them make their motions, it costs you a little time, but in the end, because you gave them that respect, they will respect the decisions that were made by the body in the end, even if they lose. Next. Basic rules of debate. And you can, next. First off, no debate without a motion pending. Now, I'd like to distinguish here, hang on a second, I'd like to distinguish here between discussion and debate. Discussion is a free-flowing exchange of ideas which may or may not end up in some decision. Debate is a formal process of pro and con statements on a motion or proposition. So you can have discussion about things and maybe not, it goes someplace. Once somebody makes a motion, you are now in the formal process of debate. Next. You debate only the immediately pending question because there may be more than one thing on the floor at a time. Next. All remarks are addressed to the chair, and you've seen this in so many organizations. The chair represents everybody, and when you're debating, you're talking to everybody, not somebody. So you address the chair. Next. No one speaks without being recognized by the chair, of course. Next. No one speaks twice until everybody who wants to has spoken once. You only get to speak twice on any issue. And normally you would take all those who want to speak and then you go back and do a second round. Next. No one speaks more than twice without the approval of the assembly. So you've got that one person who comes up 3 or 4 times on every single issue. Nah, can't do that. If a person wants to speak a third time, it's a suspension of the rules. It requires a 2/3 vote of the body to allow that person to speak again on that same topic. Next. And of course, if you have a time limit in your rules, that time limit is imposed. Next. Decorum during debate. Next. This statement is probably the single most important takeaway from this workshop. Issues, not people. Next. We don't use members' names in debate because it's about the issue, not the person. We don't say, I disagree with Joe or I disagree with Mary. You say, I disagree with what the previous speaker said, or I disagree with the statement that was made. This keeps it on the issue, not the person. That allows it to be a reasonable debate between reasonable people, and you can all go have a drink together afterward. If you ever watch C-SPAN, I'm sure a lot of you do, or the Cal channel, they always say, you know, my distinguished colleague, or, you know, the gentleman from Virginia, or whatever it is. That's part of this kind of idea, that you don't make it personal. Next. You confine remarks to the merits of the pending question. Don't get off on tangents. Sorry, no, you can't read War and Peace into the minutes. Doesn't work that way. Next. Again, refrain from attacking members or members' motives. We don't use members' names in debate. We don't attack what members, who they are or what you think their motives are. You may think you know, but you don't. We do not attack members' motives. Address all remarks to the chair. Next. Next. And of course, remain quiet while others comment. And of course, next, don't do anything that disturbs the assembly as a whole. Next. What does the chair do during debate? Next. Chair maintains an appearance of neutrality. Now I say appearance because we know everybody has an opinion on everything, but the chair is not supposed to express those opinions during the debate. Next. The chair does not enter into debate. Now, the chair can present factual information. So the proposal is to, undertake a certain project. The chair can say, well, this project will take, this amount of money and this amount of staff time. So keep that in mind. That's factual information, and if it's presented as factual information, then the chair can do that. Is that liable to influence the outcome? Probably, but as long as it's presented in a factual manner and not as debate, it's allowed. Next. Chair should recognize members in order of request or alternate pro and con on the given question. And which one of these you do depends on the setup you have. In a large room, of course, with microphones, You have pro and con microphones, so people go to the microphones, you alternate microphones. In a smaller meeting where maybe people are taking a list of who wants to speak, if you have 3 or 4 speakers in a row on one side, it's perfectly acceptable for the chair to say, okay, we've had 3 speakers in favor of this motion. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? So that you keep this you try to alternate pro and con. And if it turns out that you don't have any speakers on the other side, then maybe you can move on a little bit and slow that and not have so much debate. Okay, next. Chair should impose time limit evenly. You can't let your friends speak longer. Next. Chair must enforce the rules of decorum, and this is where you need a strong chair. And next, again, chair can vote on any question. Apply carefully, as we said before, generally only when it matters. Okay, next. Okay, how do motions get handled? Next. Member rises. Rises is a generic term which means stick something up in the air to get the attention of the chair. In some places that'll be your hand, a voting card, maybe standing up, going to a microphone, whatever it is. Member rises means get the attention of the chair. Next. Members recognized by the chair. Next. Member says, I move that we do XYZ, a definitive statement. Next. Someone else seconds the motion. Next. Chair states the motion. It is moved and seconded that we do XYZ. Now notice the maker hasn't started their debate yet. The maker makes the motion and then waits for this process to get the debate point before they start debating. This process, this step of the chair stating the motion is very important and too often shortcutted, and it shouldn't be. The chair should state the motion, or of course, if everybody has it in writing or you're projecting it on a screen, that's fine. What this does is it allows the maker of the motion to know that the chair heard it correctly. It allows the secretary another chance to write it down. It lets all the members hear it again. But most importantly, it transfers ownership. It's no longer the maker's motion. It is now the member's motion. It is the body's motion, and they can do whatever they want with that motion. Next. Chair then goes to debate, and the maker of the motion has the right to speak first. Chair asks when the debate is over, next. Chair takes the vote. Next. Chair states if the motion is passed or lost, adopted or not adopted, whatever word you want to use. Next. And you go to the next business in order. None of this, well, I'd like to say one more thing about the motion we just passed. Once it's voted on, it's over and done with. If there is implementation that needs to be discussed, then you can discuss that implementation. But that's not going back to the subject of the motion, only how it's implemented. Okay, next. These are very bad words. Next. They should never be used in a meeting. Any person who is making a motion must state the motion for clarity so everybody understands what's going on. Too many times I have been asked, well, there was this discussion of 20 minutes and somebody said, let's do X, Y, Z. And the chair said, okay, if there's no objection, we'll do it. It's, what? No. The person who makes the motion must state the motion they're making. They cannot use I so move. Next. Okay, true or false? Next. There can only be one motion on the floor at a time. False. Next. And finish out the slide. There can be several motions on the floor at the same time, but the body only debates and votes on one motion at a time. So you have a made motion, let's do X, Y, Z. Somebody else says, let's make it W, X, Y, Z. Oop, go back. There you go. Somebody else says, let's make it W, X, Y, Z. That's an amendment. Somebody says, let's do this next time. That's a postponement. Somebody says, let's refer it to committee. And somebody else says, let's shut up and vote. So all of those are now legitimately on the floor at the same time. And you would start with the last one made and go back through the list. Next. Next. Seconder must agree with the motion. False. Next. The seconder is only agreeing that it's worthy of being debated and voted on. Now, tactical issue here. If it's a motion that you want to defeat and you know the votes are there to defeat it, you might second it to get it on the floor so it gets defeated and it's gotten rid of. Guilty as charged. I've been known to do that. Okay, next. Some motions are not proper. Next. Motions which the assembly may not entertain. Next 3 times, please. Things which are in conflict with the law, the bylaws, or the charter of the organization. Outside the object of the society. So you're the Democratic Party. So if you're discussing a ballot amendment or a ballot proposition on how chiropractors do business, that's probably not within your purview. So if it's not within the object of the organization, then you can't deal with it. And the last one, question substantially the same as a matter already decided. This is in the case where somebody's motion loses and they try to rewrite it and come back and try it again. No, that's not the case. You can't do that. The only way you can go back to a motion is to reconsider, which we'll get to. I'm seeing some questions here. Yeah, you will be able to, the slides will be available. Do abstentions count toward quorum? I didn't talk about quorum, but quorum and voting are 2 different things. Quorum is the number of people who must be legally present or must be present in order to legally do business. That's normally a majority. That has nothing to do with any vote count. You have to have a quorum there in order to do a vote, but the abstention is a matter of how the votes went. It has nothing to do with the quorum. Okay, that's it so far. Next, please. Dilatory motions. Next twice. Any motion, procedural motion, can be made in a manner which is dilatory. And that's always out of order. Dilatory means it's just going to interfere with the business or the rights of members. So, for example, you take a voice vote, and it is overwhelmingly on one side, and somebody calls division. Division is how you say, let's do a recount. If the outcome was obvious, which it was, there is no reason to do a recount. That's then a dilatory motion and can be ruled out of order. Okay, next, please. Okay, assuming a motion. Under certain circumstances, the chair can assume the motion and act without a formal motion being made. This is how you kind of speed up the meeting. And it's interesting that none of these things actually speed up the meeting all that much. They save a few minutes, but it changes the tone of the meeting because people see that the routine stuff is being done efficiently and they're spending their time on actual substance, not trivial stuff. So, for example, adopting an agenda, adopting minutes, a committee or board recommendations. There doesn't have to be a formal motion for those things because they are required. The chair can simply say the next business is adoption of the agenda or the next business is adoption of the minutes. Don't have to have a motion. Minutes have to be adopted. There's no reason to sit there and wait for somebody to make a motion and for the chair to say, I'll accept the motion in the minutes. That's just waste of time. Chair assumes the motion and continues. Basically, anything that is routine, required, and fairly simple can be done in this way. No vote is taken. It's only no objection. So the statement is, if there's no corrections to the minutes or no objection, the minutes are adopted as presented. Done. No vote. Okay. Next. Okay. How do you open a meeting? So I'm going to act as the presiding officer here, and I'm going to open the meeting. Next. The November meeting of the Paisley Society will come to order. A quorum is present. The first business is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions from the members? Next. If there are, I would say, okay, we'll put that in the agenda at this point. If there's not, we go to the next. And I say, if there's no changes in the agenda or no more changes, the agenda is approved as stands. The next business is approval of the minutes of, and I insert the date, which you were previously sent. Now notice we're not going to read the minutes. That kind of went out a long time ago when we started having Xerox. So everybody gets the minutes in advance and everybody has a copy. So then I say, okay, are there any corrections? Next. If there are corrections, I incorporate them. And what I generally say is if you note a spelling error or a name is spelled wrong, just let the secretary know, we'll take care of it. And if there's other objections or other corrections, then they're incorporated. And if somebody objects to one of those, you put that to a vote, a majority to approve that correction. Then, next, chair says if there's no corrections or no more corrections, the minutes are approved as either presented or corrected. Again, you didn't take a formal vote because you don't need it. That's the only thing you can do at that point is approve it. Therefore, a motion is unnecessary. Okay, now let's start talking about actual motions. Next, please. Next. Okay. Next. There are a hierarchy of motions in Robert's Rules. There are 98 motions in Robert's Rules. We're going to go over all of them. No, just kidding. We don't have time. That's a couple of weeks worth. Next, 13 of those motions have a specific rank and order of precedence. And once one of those is made, no lower one can be made. There's also going to be available for you a cheat sheet, which is something I put together, and the 13 ranking motions is on the cheat sheet. Next, all other of those 80-some motions fit into the order depending upon the circumstances, and that's a lot why I get hired. Next. Okay, here are the motions. Starting off with the main motion, postpone indefinitely, amend, etc. I'm not going to read the list as it goes up. But once one of these is made, nothing lower on the list can be made until the first motion is taken care of. Now notice, if you will, here that 1 through 4 or 5, 1 through 5 deal with the business of the assembly in general, not with a specific motion. 6, 7, and 8 deal with how the body is going to deal with it, how the body is going to conduct themselves. And 9, 10, 11, 12 all deal with things you're going to do to the main motion. Now, the logic here is somebody moves to postpone indefinitely, which is the motion to kill it, and I'll go over that later. But if you're going to amend it, maybe you don't want to kill it. So amend takes precedence over postpone indefinitely. On the other hand, if you're going to refer it to the committee, you let them take care of the amendments, and you don't have to do it here. And of course, if you're going to postpone it, then nothing gets taken care of here. So that's kind of the logic behind this ranking. Next. So let's talk about some individual motions. A main motion, next, is a new piece of business that comes before the assembly. So somebody says, I move we do X, Y, Z. That's a main motion. Next. Postpone indefinitely. Next. This is a motion that stops the consideration of a pending motion without actually voting on the motion. And it kills it for that session, for that meeting. Next. Postpone indefinitely must be seconded. Next. It is debatable, and that debate can go into the merits of the motion. Next. But it only requires a majority vote. Next. Yeah, majority vote in order to postpone indefinitely and move that on to another meeting. Next, amend. Next, amend is how you alter words in a motion that has been made. Next, you can add words. Next, you can remove words. Next, you can remove and add words in the same place at the same time. Next, or you can move words around. Or next, you can have a substitute motion. Now, I want to talk a little bit about substitute because this gets a little tricky and it's a little bit misunderstood. Substitute motion only applies to an amendment to a motion. And the idea is that, okay, so you have a paragraph that needs 6 different changes in order to make it make sense the way you want to make it, the way you want to make the change. So instead of making 6 individual amendments, which is a problem, you substitute an entirely new paragraph with all of those changes in it. Now, this can be a paragraph or several paragraphs. In fact, the legislature frequently, does this to the entire bill or the entire motion. That's not generally done in regular organizations, but the idea here is it's substituting a paragraph or a large part of the motion with new text that incorporates several different amendments. Okay. Next. Second amendments must be seconded. Next. Amendments are debatable. Next. Amendments are amendable once. You can have an amendment and an amendment to the amendment, but you can't go any farther than that. Otherwise, it gets too confusing. Next. If the motion gets referred to the committee, all the motions, even the ones that haven't been completed yet, go with. Next, and it requires a majority vote for the amendment, regardless of what the main motion requires. Next, and bring up the whole slide at once, please. The motion is to buy a wood leather top desk for the office. So an amendment is to move to insert the word red between wood and leather after comma. Notice that we said a very specific thing here. It's not I want to amend it to do something. I want to put this language in the motion. So here we're inserting a word red between wood and leather, which means a red leather top desk for the office. Very specific. Now, if somebody was to then move not to exceed $500 after office, that would be out of order because that's amending a different place in the motion. So an amendment to the amendment must amend the original amendment. However, once the original amendment here, the red amendment is taken care of, then the other motion can be made. Now, next, please. Full slide, please. This is a change in the 12th edition. By the way, the 12th edition just came out last September. They upgrade Robert's rules about once every 10 years. The last one was 2011, so now we have the 2020 edition. You are allowed to propose several unrelated amendments to a motion at the same time. This is section 1214 of Robert's rules. If they are connected and dependent, then you can't separate the different ones. However, if they aren't connected and dependent, then those motions can be divided. So an example here is on our motion, to add oak before wood, red before leather, and not to exceed 500 at the end. So there's one person making all 3 of those motions at the same time. So it allows a greater flexibility. Okay, let's go to a couple of questions. Can you suspend bylaws? No, you cannot. Bylaws are not suspendable, ever. Is the coronavirus cause to suspend? This is something of some debate between myself and my fellow parliamentarian. Some take the attitude that if it doesn't stay in the bylaws that you can do electronic meetings, then you can't, and you have to figure out something else. Personally, and this is my opinion, I believe that if the government tells you you can't do certain things like meet according to your bylaws, that gives you both authority and permission to do it some other way. So, but again, that's my opinion. Get your own counsel to weigh in on that, because they're the one that's going to have to defend it. Oh, if the resolution is amended by the body, does that mean it belongs to the body? Yes, it does. It belongs to the body before it's amended. It belongs to the body as soon as the chair states it is moved and seconded that we do something. And there are no friendly amendments. Those don't exist. Every amendment needs to be processed. Okay, there's a long one here about chair voting. Oh, okay. This is about if you are an elected representative and you're acting as chair. Here is one of those cases where I'm not sure Roberts applies. And as again, this is something you should deal with council. If the member is representing if the chair is representing a constituency, and that chair is not allowed to debate or vote, then that constituency is not represented properly. This is something that you're going to have to deal with within that particular body. And state law always supersedes Robert's rules. And I can't read the rest of it. Okay. This is something you're going to have to deal with within your own rules, that you can create your own special rules. What I would say is that in most cases, even if the chair is representing a constituency, they should still only vote when it matters, only vote when it's a tie or to make a tie or when it matters. Or what you can do, and we're doing this now in electronic voting, because in electronic voting, we treat electronic voting the same way we do as a ballot vote. The chair can always vote in electronic vote. So if you're voting by Zoom poll, the chair can vote. Now, here's the interesting part. The host can't vote. So somebody else should be the host, not the chair. And if you're doing any kind of other electronic voting, then of course, the chair votes all the time. So, but should the chair vote on stuff when there's a clear majority one side or the other? Probably not. Yeah, should is not the same as must. You're right. The chair should not, but they can't be prevented from. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's continue with the next one, which is, next please, germaneness. Next twice, please. The amendment must involve the same question as the motion to which it applies. This is called being germane to the motion. And normally it's the decision of the chair, but the assembly can decide if the chair wants them to. Next. Next twice. Amendments must be accepted by the maker and the seconder. False. In case you haven't got the gist yet, anytime I ask one of these questions, it's always false. Once the amendment is stated by the chair, it belongs to the assembly. They can amend it as they wish. Or once the motion is made, it's stated by the chair, it belongs to the assembly, and they can amend it as they wish. The chair, the maker of the motion has no rights to say yes or no to any amendment. The maker only has the right to speak first. That's it. That's the only right the maker has after the motion is made, is to speak first. Some assemblies will give the maker more time. to speak, then they give everybody else. And that's okay if that's according to your rules, but that's fine. Okay, next, as I said, this I've already dealt with this. Friendly amendments. Next. 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 Don't exist. The idea is somebody says, well, I got better wording. If that happens before the chair says it's moved and seconded that then yeah, the maker can say, okay, I'll take that. After that point, after the chair states the motion, all the motions, all amendments must be processed. Okay, next. And we're getting a little tight on time, so we're going to go by this. Next, please. Previous question. Next. This ends debate. Proceeds to vote on the pending question. Next. You probably know this as call the question or move to end debate. Next, must be seconded. Next, it's not debatable. Next, it's not amendable. And it requires a 2/3 vote. Anytime you change the rights of the members, it requires a 2/3 vote. Next. Next and next and next. If someone says I call the question, the chair should just shouts out from the back of the room, the chair should immediately stop and take a vote. Absolutely not. That's an egregious violation of people's rights. A motion must be made to call the question or move the previous question. The person must be recognized, the motion is seconded, and it must be voted on. You cannot allow one person to control a debate. Okay, next. When people speak out of order, what language is used to adjust the chair? The member should say, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman, or however you address your chair, the member is speaking inappropriately, something of that sort, okay? Always keep it politely and, of course, never use their name. The chair allow a member to vote if they haven't paid dues. That's up to you, to your own bylaws and your standing rules, whether or not members in arrears are allowed to vote. Okay, lay on the table. This is probably the single most misused motion in the parliamentary book. Next. This is to lay something aside temporarily while you do something of more importance, like your guest speaker showed up or you have a time-sensitive issue. Next, 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 next. Must be seconded, not debatable. Although an explanation can be given, they're not amendable. Next twice. Majority vote to lay on the table, and then you vote to take it from the table. Okay, next. Reconsider. Next. This is how you go back to something you've already done and talk about it again. Next 4 times. You can only reconsider something on the same day that it was made, or if you have a convention of multiple days, the next business day. Obviously, if something has been done that can't be undone, you can't reconsider that. It must be moved by a person who voted on the prevailing side, and reconsider only requires a majority vote. Okay, next. And we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip the next slide. So please go next. Next, next, next. Next, 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 next. Okay, appeal from the decision of the chair. This causes the ruling of the chair to be decided by the assembly. The chair is not God. So if the chair calls something out of order, for example, members can appeal that ruling. Next. So a member stands up and says, I appeal the ruling of the chair. That somebody else seconds it. Next. It may be debatable, and I don't have time to go into when it is or not. Next. Majority vote in the negative to overturn the chair. So the way this happens is somebody says, I make an appeal. The chair gives their reasoning for making the ruling in the first place. The maker of the motion, then the appealer says why they think it's appealed. And the chair says, all those who would uphold the chair will vote yes. All those who would overturn the chair vote no. Requires a majority in the negative to overturn the chair. Okay, next. Okay, now we're going to go into next. We're going to do some stuff about virtual meetings because I know you're all interested in doing that. And then we'll take up whatever time we have left with the questions. Next, electronic meetings. First off, they must be authorized in the bylaws, except for what I said earlier. The minimum requirement is all parties can hear each other simultaneously. This is also California Corporation Code requirement. And you need to make special rules for those meeting processes, and those are dependent on which platform you're going to use. GoToMeeting is different than Adobe Connect is different than Zoom. And I've used at least 6 or 8 of these now. Next, issues. The parliamentary process is the same as a face-to-face meeting, but they're handled a little differently. You have to figure out who is allowed and how do you do verification of people that are there. How do you determine what is the quorum? Do you do it off the list of attendees or do you do a roll call? How do you determine your quorum? How do you speakers get recognized? Is there a hand raise feature? Is there some other feature you want them to use? Who gets to share documents? Voting, big issue. Is there an internal polling structure within this platform? Or, as some folks have done particularly for elections, use an outside electronic voting service that allows you to do these votes outside of the actual meeting. How about dealing with interrupting motions? Because some motions can interrupt others. Making and posting motions on the fly. Next. Pre-planning motions in advance on shareable documents. You should have one person that's controlling what's happening on the screen. Have polls ready, which are generic, just do you agree with the motion or not? Alternative for those who don't receive the polls. Some phones or older computers may not be able to vote, so you need to have some alternate method. Somebody can text their vote to somebody, or if they're comfortable with it, put it in the chat. Pre-meeting ability to test. One of the organizations I did before every one of their national meetings, which were day-long meetings, people can check in the afternoon before and make sure they've solved all their tech issues before you get to the meeting. And you need non-participant staff to be running the tech, etc. Okay, next. Determining quorum, raising hands, who has the power to mute and unmute, how do you spotlight, etc. Okay, next. Posting motions, communicating and posting amendments, interrupting motions. What happens in a tech crash? Do you just stop where you are and bring it back up? Use of chat box is questionable. It constitutes debate outside of the meeting, which is generally not allowed. So if you can turn it on and off, that's a good thing. Okay, next. I always end with this one to remind us that this is a tool that you have to learn to use in order to use it right. Okay, let me go through a couple of questions. Abstention, 100 members present voting, 80 vote aye, 20 vote to abstain. What's the total vote on which the base majority of 2/3? If it's a 2/3, unless you have a requirement which is a majority or 2/3 of the members present, then it's a majority or 2/3 of the votes cast. So in the case that is here, 180 votes, 20 abstain, the abstentions don't count. The motion is adopted. And in any case, again, if you have them, as I said, with abstentions, they don't count. They're not votes. If you have circumstances where they have a majority of the members present, which is California Corporation Code and nonprofit bylaws, and the nonprofit organizations for a board, then yes, they're going to affect a vote, but they're still not votes and they don't count. Okay? I can see everybody's hungry for more of this. And we can do a lot more. There is one thing I would like to do. I'm going to put up a link. Oops, back. I got off my screen here. Okay, back on my screen. I'm going to put up in the chat, if I can. There we go. a link. Oops. Okay. I'm putting a link up in the chat. This is to a paper written by a fellow by the name of Jim Slaughter. Jim Slaughter is a very prominent parliamentarian, does a lot of work with large organizations such as the National Education Association. I think he's parliamentarian for the Teamsters, etc. He has put out a several page document on his things with large virtual conventions, representative assemblies, and houses of delegates. It's very informative, and I would suggest you all look it up and read it. It's available at that URL there. Thank you. I appreciate the thanks. Anything else we need to do? Anything else you're really worried about? The parliamentarian in the meeting. Okay. The role of the parliamentarian is to first assist the chair in running the meeting. So the parliamentarian should be seated next to the chair and be able to communicate discreetly with the chair. I often bring my laptop and will type into my laptop what the chair should be saying, and the chair says it. I'm just reading it off my laptop. During other times, during breaks, before and after, I usually try to set up some kind of office hours where the members can come to me and ask questions. Doing workshops like this is often done in particularly larger meetings. But the main function in a meeting of the parliamentarian is to assist the chair in running the meeting. Okay, anything else? And remember, you can generate your own rules which supersede Robert's rules. They're called special rules of order because we know no book is going to be absolutely complete. Also, if you want other resources, you can go to both the National Association of Parliamentarians website and the American Institute of Parliamentarians website. They have all sorts of educational materials, and they provide other education as well. Amend the bylaws to allow virtual meetings when you can't safely in person vote on amending bylaws. Under the California Corporations Code, and I'm not an attorney and this is not legal advice, there's something called doing business without a meeting. And you can do that process, which means you get unanimous consent of the board, unanimous written consent of the board to do something. Members who show up late. Well, yeah, members, if they have the right to vote, it doesn't matter whether they show up late or not. They can still vote. Is the parliamentarian allowed to speak? Yes. Yes.
I know we can have lots of questions,
yeah.
And they always say you should leave people wanting more. So we're definitely going to have more trainings on Robert's Rules of Order,
okay.
Especially in the virtual arena. Can people please give a round of applause virtually, and so either we can see you, this way, or the emoji for Mr. Parliamentarian and this great informative training. I know I learned a lot today. I'm the co-chair of a board and a lot of meetings, and of course with the California Democratic Party. So thank all of you for being a part of this training. Thank to our ASL interpreters, to our amazing India and our tech team, and to all of you for being with us for this training. We stay tuned for more. If you have any suggestions for specific topics within Robert's Rules of Order that you want to learn about, please email training@cadem.org. so we can be able to keep that in mind for the future. And if you have any specific, if you want to get a training just for your region or something else, then maybe you should call Mr. Parliamentarian. So on that note,
my website is mrparliamentarian.com.
There we go. Thank you all. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your eBoard weekend.
Okay. Bye.